If you're into analog horror and you don't live under a rock, there's a pretty high chance that you may have heard of UrbanSPOOK, a newer analog horror series that started about half a year ago and has been on the rise in popularity ever since. Many have been praising the series as refreshing, a breath of fresh air, or maybe even the best analog horror. However, personally, I believe all these claims to be grossly misguided. This might seem like an unpopular opinion, and it is, but that's not to say that I'm the only one who feels this way. I think the precedent this series sets is not something that we should be welcoming with such open arms, and in this video I'm going to discuss why I believe UrbanSPOOK and its creator are not as good as you think. As a disclaimer, I do have a few things I'm obligated to say before we continue. First and foremost, I do not condone the harassment of the series creator in any way whatsoever, and if you do this, you're an awful person. Second, I'd actually encourage any of you who have made it this far who haven't seen the original series to at least go and check it out and return to watch the video, because I don't want to form your opinion for you, and I think any media deserves at least your unbiased opinion beforehand. Alright, let's do this. In order to properly convey how I feel about the series, I think I should start by recounting how I felt while I was watching it for the first time. In the first episode, Faces, we get the general gist of what's going on. The story follows a serial murderer who has a tendency to use over-the-top and brutal methods against his victims. The thing that makes the premise at all interesting or unique are the paintings that the murderer leaves behind on the crime scenes. I'm going to assume that at this point that all of you here have seen every episode of the series, so I'm going to go ahead and start with my first criticism, which is the presentation. Throughout all 5 videos, the presentation is entirely limited to a black screen with white text and the occasional image that is meant to unnerve or scare you. There's no voice acting, there's no video, and the music, while unnerving, doesn't actually add very much to the overall experience. This is probably the least creative and directionally interesting decision that could have possibly been made by the creator. Other newer, less popular series like Canisgate or Sins of the Past do a much better job at having good direction and good presentation. What's worse is that the videos we see are actually meant to be in-universe VHS tapes, which makes the unimaginative presentation make even less sense. Due to the series becoming popular despite this, it's begun to set a new precedent for the kind of presentation you can get away with as an analog horror creator, and it's shown with many recent projects that have been coming up. In my opinion, this is just wrong. The point of analog horror in the first place is to use the analog medium for unique presentation that feels like it belongs in the analog era. If you stop and think about it for a second, UrbanSPOOK doesn't really benefit from this medium at all, and doesn't have any reason to be labeled as an analog horror series aside for popularity. The story could be set in the modern day and almost nothing would change. That's not the only thing that makes it uninteresting though. In my opinion, the story as we currently know it is rather bland. So far, the series really only has one recurring character, which is the antagonist. However, we don't really know anything about him aside from a vague understanding of his appearance and the fact that he kills people. Now, it would be very inaccurate for me to suggest that making a good analog horror without many consistent, strongly written characters is impossible, because it's not. Gemini Home Entertainment and Vita Carnis are some of my favorite examples that come to mind of this working out. However, what these two series have that UrbanSPOOK does not have is strong presentation and direction. You won't see anything like the peaks of those two series in UrbanSPOOK. Because of the lack of any fleshed out characters and the lack of good presentation and direction, the series falls short in the most important aspects of creating an interesting narrative, and for me personally, it's just not that interesting. For what little story it does have, it wastes by relying entirely on shock value. The murderer in the story uses an almost comedic level of violence and brutality against his victims, and each and every aspect of these methods is described to us in shocking detail. And that's not inherently a bad thing, and I'm sure that it works for many people, and I respect anyone who feels that way. But for many other people, like me, it kind of comes off as cheap and just makes me roll my eyes as opposed to eliciting any sort of fear or unease in me. I don't think that the use of this is blatantly disrespectful or anything like that until we get to the third episode. In episode 1, one of the paintings we see depicted is named Fucktoy Corey. However, we find out in episode 3 that this Fucktoy Corey was actually referring to an 11-year-old child who went missing alongside his twin sister Margaret. It goes on to describe in detail how Corey's genitalia was forcefully removed, which when combined with the context of the painting's name, can only really lead to one assumption. This is the point in which the content of the series goes from gross yet harmless to just straight up offensive and distasteful. And as if that wasn't already bad enough, he also has a merch store where he sells shirts of every single painting he's ever made for the series, which wouldn't be a bad thing until you consider that one of those shirts includes the Fucktoy Corey painting. In other words, let me lay this out for you. He is using his own depiction of an 11-year-old child who was sexually assaulted by a murderer on the face of a shirt that he is selling for personal profit. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm certainly not the first person to have these criticisms about the series, so how has he responded to these criticisms in the past? Well, if you were to actually go to his Twitter right now, you wouldn't actually find very much, despite the account being made in 2012. This is because the creator seems to have a tendency of deleting things that he knows don't look good in public, and he also doesn't use the platform very much. Fortunately, a friend of mine has documented one of these deleted interactions, and after being directly confronted with the use of the content I just described just a bit ago, his response is to say, "I have no personal limits to what's okay or not, and it will probably get worse?" That's not really the kind of response that you would expect from somebody, and he knew that because he deleted this entire interaction. Even less than a day ago, as I was writing the script, he was acting super dismissive and started a whole other, Twitter drama related to himself. And he doesn't really acknowledge the present issues or do anything about it. And trust me, there's a lot of criticism on Twitter. For the most part, these criticisms just echo the points that I've made in this video. It's not really anything worth talking about in depth, but the rabbit hole on this guy goes a lot deeper than this. In his bio, he displays two other usernames that he's been known by in the past: Dark Urban Souls and Urban Slug. The first of these aliases is pretty much just an unconcerning gaming channel that I have no issues with. The other, though, is his older of the three channels, and it has some oddly similar content to UrbanSPOOK despite being made in 2006? I'm not going to go into too many details, but there's a persistent theme of pedophilia, borderline scat fetishization, and creepy, rape-like scenarios in his older animations that he made back in 2012. One of his newer animations literally involves a guy fucking a knife wound that he put on a person's back. It's strange, right? It seems pretty easy to just pass these off as just strange, haha, edgy joke videos that he made a long time ago. But the consistency of their themes, especially the ones that aren't really funny and aren't even portrayed as jokes, they're just really gross, combined with retrospective knowledge of the eerily similar stuff that the guy is up to today, does cause me to at least raise an eyebrow, but God forbid I make any assumptions, right? And it's not like he's forgotten about this channel either, because he acknowledges it in his Twitter bio. That's literally how I found it, and he still uses it. The most recent upload is from less than a year ago. He hasn't bothered unlisting these older animations, so he clearly still approves of them, in a way. And like I said earlier, the channel was created in 2006, so this is a grown-ass man that we're talking about. Alright, hey, before we get to the end of the video, this is me from the future with a much better microphone. I did want to clarify a few things for anyone who hasn't really got the reason why I don't like this series yet and is still confused on why I feel the way I do. I want to clarify that I don't think that you are not allowed to include
most of the things in UrbanSPOOK in your story writing. Like, you're allowed to cover heavy topics. The problem that I have is that that's basically all that this series has, and it's not done in a very respectful way. That's the reason why I don't like it. I don't think that you have to not include things like this in your series in their entirety, except for child essay. Please don't put that in your series.
Either way, in conclusion, UrbanSPOOK is not good for the future of analog horror. It's not a good precedent to set for quality, and it's not even that good by itself. The series relies entirely on shock to elicit any kind of emotional reaction out of the viewer, and the creator has an over decade-long history of doing very strange and at least mildly concerning things. And although I cannot stop any of you from supporting him, nor do I particularly care if you do, since it's, in reality, not any of my business, I do hope that this video has at least opened your eyes to the issues of the series and the weird things that the creator has done. Like, you're totally allowed to form your own opinion on if you think that this is even worth caring about, and I'm not going to stop you. The main reason why I decided to make this video in the first place is because I just wanted to get my and many others' opinion critically on the series out there, and also the objective facts about the kind of creepy things that the creator used to do. I just wanted to get those out there into the world, since not many people seem to know that. Anyways, this was a shorter video, but either way, I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to join my Discord server, and if you join just to be mad about this video, I'm gonna ban you, so don't even bother. Until next time.